Hello guys, this is my second story about fanfics, which I read into my YouTube channel. So this is called Not an Oblivion, written by I Am a Reptile. Writer's notes. I decided to go for writing this story because I miss the magical world. I just really miss all those characters, interactions between them, and I like to imagine the slight but visible chemistry that would have been between Draco and Hermione after the war, when they'd become adults and change. English is not my native language. I wanted to say this right now because I have no idea how many mistakes are in there. So let's go and begin with chapter 1. When the Great War was ended, the trio of best friends somehow broke. Harry was the first one that snapped. He went away from Britain, promising he'd send letters every week and will be back soon. But he stayed in some small ugly town in Poland that Hermione hadn't even heard of. He wrote 4 or 5 letters, sir, but later they stopped coming, and maybe it was because of the fact that there weren't enough owls where he lived, or maybe because he simply chose to forget. She knew she could never, ever forget what happened, even if she moved, even if she changed everything about her life, she still would have been the same person and the same Hermione that was tortured in Malfoy Manor, that stayed with Harry all those months in windy cold fields and woods, alone, knowing nothing about the future, scared of dying every single second. She knew she needed some magical therapy, help from somebody else than her friends. But when life stopped being dangerous again, she felt like she could handle everything on her own, like she always did. She couldn't. What was the worst? 2 years had passed, and she still was just as lost as she was at the beginning. For starters, she never reached to her parents in Australia. At first, she was just waiting for the battle dust to settle, for the world to become safe once again. But when it became normal, when she didn't feel like a survivor anymore, she still wouldn't go for a search for them. She was still scared for them, even though she knew nothing could hurt them anymore. What if something was to happen to her mother, this great, clever, loving woman that gave her everything, and the father, the man she respected the most? They never hurt her, but seeing her the way she was after the war could hurt them. Hermione wanted for them to stay happy, to live a good life, and once, only once, she sent a Patronus their way. It found them and brought information about their peaceful life and their son. Hermione wasn't their daughter anymore. It would have been too painful and horrible to break a pretty lovely life they built for themselves, and only for her to hold them one more time. She didn't want to be that selfish, and she predicted that turn of events long time ago. She even told Ronald at some point, but he wasn't able to talk back. He never talked. So Harry ran away and left them. Ginny, not being able to handle his absence and that of a majority of her family, including mother and three brothers, completely disappeared from the magic world, living as far as Hermione could tell in the suburbs of London and working at some Muggle cafe. Hermione never visited. She didn't know if Ginny would have wanted it. She probably wouldn't. Luna and Neville got married soon after the war was ended. Neville was granted a lot of medals and was given a nice job in the Ministry of Magic. And Luna, well, she didn't need much. Hermione heard that she was pregnant, and later on that she had a healthy child that she chose to stay at home with. She also proceeded with her mother's experiments, although way more carefully. That was a nice life, Hermione supposed. And there was Ronald. She wouldn't have ever predicted that he'd be the one to suffer so greatly after everything that happened, but he was. And it struck her. It killed something in her. It made her hate the world, because she loved him. Of course she did, even though some wouldn't understand or acknowledge it. She knew that people gossiped behind her back that she got stuck with the invalid moron, that he was never good enough for her, the most talented witch, says Rowena Ravenclaw, the most gifted mage of her times. But it was all only hurting her, and she knew that at some level it also hurt Ronald. When they fell in love, the world was different. They both weren't that scarred, that bruised. They were young and ready for almost anything, especially sacrificing themselves for love. That was told to shield them. It didn't. Ron fell ill half a year after Voldemort's death. At first, he didn't notice the signs, because they were happier than ever. They were getting drunk on the streets of magical London with fellow wizards, just as happy as they were. They were chanting heartwarming songs about victory and success and never-ending love. And they were great together. They spent every minute of every day together, in a small apartment, and couldn't care less about where they will end up or who will they become. When the letter came telling them that they could take the tests they never did pass, they gladly studied together and finally graduated. Hermione was obviously way better than Ronald, and Harry, who was by that time still in England, wasn't perfect either, but they all finished Hogwarts, which gave them all of the opportunities. Right now, when Hermione thinks about these wonderful months, she can't help but think it was all hopeless. They just didn't want to see what was coming. What was there in the darkness ready to bite, to hit them all, because they were so happy. Yet it came and swallowed them whole, Golden Trio as well as everyone else. You can't be a hero forever, Harry realized this too soonest, and that was why he left the country. Hermione never really thought she could be a hero, so she didn't notice how her traumas grasped, grasped her and never let her go, and Ron, he was the saddest one. Always. She only saw it after his disease happened. He was there for both of them when the world that they knew was falling apart, telling jokes, trying to make them feel alive. But when the end came, It was only for him. She still thinks it was unfair, in the worst way possible. Now when she sits in his bed and sees his face, white and blank as page, she feels heartbroken in the way she never did before. Her heart searches for something, anything in this beloved face, any signal that he recognizes her. Not even that he loves her, it is long gone, but there is nothing. Ron is not only absent, he is dying, and Hermione knows that very well. Yet she still loves him in a way that people who don't know them will never understand. He is not only the person she sought comfort in when they went through the hardest days of their lives, he is not only the one she turned to when she thought she was dying any minute. He was the one who held her hand during the hardest nights, and one she kissed when she was sure it was the end, and the first one she ever made love to, the one with whom she got drunk for the first time, and who held her hair when she puked all of the wine. He was, and she was absolutely sure about it, the very first and biggest love of her life. More than family, more than soulmate, more than life itself at some point. He wasn't a stupid addition to her and Harry, as some would say, even though she loved Harry with her whole heart and was ready to die for him. It was Ron, not Harry, who made her cry when he forgot about her. He forgot, and yet he still was here, in front of her, not able to say a thing, not knowing who he was. "You're a hero, honey," she said as always, kissing his forehead with the slightest of kisses. "My hero, I know you're there somewhere, and please know that I miss you." Hermione then looks deeply into his eyes, as well as always trying to look for something for the flame that she knew. It's not there. They aren't brightly hazel anymore. They are dusty and foggy, and they are the eyes of a stranger. Chapter 2. Hermione walks the same way every day. For a year. She knows is by heart by now, yet never takes another one. She has learned, better than anything, that taking risks is not an option for her anymore. She walks fast, not wanting to be late to the medical lawyer's office where she works as a junior assistant. And she doesn't even notice when a man walks into her way by a coincidence. He crosses his body into hers and drops his phone, which looks very expensive. Of course the phone breaks, man grunts, pushes her even, and she is quite indifferent to it. Sorry, she mutters, trying to walk away. She doesn't really care about him or his stupid phone. If he looks like this, dressed in a fancy coat and shiny shoes, he can afford buying another one. And it was his fault that he didn't watch where he goes, not hers. Well, 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 she hears, and suddenly she knows who is this, and she wants to run away or kill this man instantly. Rage comes to her throat like an alcohol too heavy and hot to swallow. "Well, well, what?" she asks, looking him in the eye, and yes, she wasn't mistaken, it's him. She wouldn't she would have recognized this voice and these eyes everywhere. Well, well, I am the one who is sorry, he says, raising his eyebrows. Almost made you fall down, Granger. It's Weasley now, she growls. But I'm sure you know that and only try to get on my nerves. Fine, but not today. I'm busy. We'll talk some other time. Didn't know, he says, looking at her without any emotion visible on his pale face. But weirdly believes him. Sorry, happy for you. It's okay, I must go now. Again, sorry about the phone. Phone doesn't matter, he shakes his head. Glad you're fine, Weasley. She recognized no signs of pity in his voice and is completely shocked. Where did the old Draco Malfoy go? The one that would have spat on any member of the Weasley family any chance he would have, and on her, on that matter. He only looks at her for a few more glances, nothing in his steely eyes, then turns his back on her and walks away. It takes Hermione a while to shake off a weird feeling this unexpected meeting brought. But when she does and continues her walk to the workplace, she notices something she missed before. He was smiling at her, smirking maybe, but anyway, he never ever smiled at a mudblood in his entire life, as far as she remembered, never, until now. Chapter 3. A year passes that is both tough and good for Hermione. On one hand, she gets better at her job, making her supervisor promote her to a senior assistant. It's new and exciting because being a magical lawyer is something rare, unique even, and not easy. And her boss is the best in the branch. He is recognized in the whole magical world. But on the other hand, Ronald gets worse and Hermione doesn't know what to do. She hires someone to help, but they can't do much more than she can. When she comes back from work, she reads to him. She falls asleep by his side every night, sometimes crying herself to sleep. But no mage and no doctor can make him get better. They all say that the loss she suffocated changed him and slowly turned his mind into a prison that nobody can lock him out of. Not even Hermione, his beloved wife, who was by his side all the time, during war and peace. Ron doesn't smile anymore, his face turns into a horrible mask that Hermione washes with infinite patience and delicacy. She kisses his stone-cold lips every dusk and every dawn, holds his hand when she is home, cares about him deeply, even though he shows no emotion, nothing. She knows it is not because he doesn't want to, it's because he is sick. So she stays and anticipates what's about to come, scared as ever, but ready. When he dies, it catches her off guard, but she still survives it the exact way that old Hermione would have. She walks into their bedroom one morning with her coffee. She used to be drinking white, but when he got sick, she turned to black one, just like the one he used to take, and sees his eyes, the cutest, warmest eyes, staring blankly into the ceiling. He didn't really look at her these days anyway, but she somehow felt instantly that it isn't just the absent look of an ill person. It's the look that a dead person gave, empty, scary, sad look. She knew that kind of eyes from the war. So she gave him the last kiss, filled with affection and great, great memories, and called for who was needed and took care of the rest, burying him, letting his family know everything, as a good wife should. Nobody had to know how badly it hurt her, how deeply it broke her, so she didn't show it during the ceremony and almost never after. Hermione saw Ginny that day, for the first time in a long time. She was great, weirdly. She looked very nice with long ginger hair, naturally glowing face and dressed in a black, simple dress. Ginny hugged Hermione as a sister would have hugged her, long, intensely, and that hug told everything they couldn't include in words: love for him, gratitude, longing, and last but not least, being proud of him. Ginny said that she was happy living outside of the magical crap. She had her own coffee shop in London, met a man, and had a nice normal relationship. Hermione knew that Ginny missed Harry. It was as simple as that, right there in her eyes. But they both didn't mention it. What for? He was long gone. He didn't even come here for the memorial. Hermione received a letter a few months after that he was very sick by the time, and she believed it, but the fact was a fact: he didn't come. Ginny and Hermione parted ways after the ceremony, solemnly swearing they will catch up to each other soon. It never happened, and Hermione didn't really expect that. Those were only words. Chapter 4. 2 years after Ron died, Hermione's boss, Jake Handledare, died either. It was a heart attack, and Hermione wasn't even surprised because his work was very intense and he rarely even had any break from it. He was one of the first magical lawyers of all times, and he was counselor and barrister of many, many criminals that offended the mage's criminal code, representing them before the great Wizengamot's court in many countries of the world. Hermione, after taking special classes and courses, knew what was needed to do his job well, and because of it, she took his practice after him. Jake was 60 when he died, and Hermione was surprised to hear about it, and nonetheless she was quite ready for the next step in her career. She took the opportunity, and even though she missed Jake, who she grew really fond of, she became a magical lawyer almost as good as him, ready for every dispute, willing to take any client. But one day she encountered something that made her rethink her choices. A man that came into her office looked at her, raised his eyebrows, and sat down in one of Wellor's nice chairs, putting one of his legs on the other in a very nonchalant way. From her experience, clients rarely felt as half as confident as he did. "Hello," he said in a very vibrant dark voice. "Are you Jake Handledare? I suppose not." "As you can see, no," she said, sighing. "What brings you here, mister?" "A desperate need for a good and discreet lawyer," said the man with extreme conservatism in his voice. "But as I see I'm going to have a look somewhere else." "I thought the Jake was the best, and since he isn't here—" "Jake has passed," interrupted Hermione abruptly. "I'm here now, in charge of his past clients and future ones." "Which one are you, Mr. Malfoy?" "I'm a future one, I guess," he said with a nearly imperceptible Imperceptible smirk, but my father used to be a client of Jake, as far as I know. He wasn't lying. Hermione knew Jake's files, and Lucius Malfoy was somewhere there. At least 4 cases, she said lightly, banging her fingers on the desk, as if she was bored. If I can remember well, 3 of them was redress processes from the lawsuits of Death Eater's victims, and the remaining one, well, divorce process. So I guess Narcissus and Lucius are no longer together. Condolences. You have good information, Granger, Malfoy grimaced. Weasley, I'm sorry. I tend to forget about marriages. I'm a widow, so your problem is now solved, she said lightly, although her soul suddenly filled with pain again. Never mind. How can I help you? First, I need you to sign some papers, saying that you're my lawyer. I can't tell you anything under unless we are under attorney-client privilege. Understandable, Hermione said, but before I give you any contracts, why on earth would you entrust your case with someone like me? Malfoy's face, stone-like pretty face, showed a sign of sadness for a second. It was just a glimpse, but Hermione cocked it easily. I have no one to go to, he said, smiling falsely. I would of course prefer Jake, but if you're the only one here, well, when you sign my papers, you will be obliged to keep everything I say in secrets. It doesn't matter if I trust you personally. And you don't? Why would I? Silence was weird and made Hermione anxious, and she was a girl once again. She sighed and grabbed 2 pieces of paper. "Read them carefully and sign them," she said, giving Malfoy the forms. "And later I'd love to know what exactly is going on, that you need a magical lawyer all of a sudden." "Sir," he muttered, and started to read. She noticed how nervous he was. Even though he was great at hiding this, his hands weren't shaking. He wasn't sweating, but something in his posture, in the way that he breathed, told her with certainty that he was flustered, maybe even scared. He didn't change that much. Well, she changed almost everything about her, from the way she styled her hair and nails, to the way she dressed and even walked. No, not not she. To the way he dressed and even walked. He was still almost exactly the same. Same blonde, almost silver hair, now a little bit longer than at school, extravagant clothes worn with confidence. The only difference was a short, well-kept silver beard that made him look older, and glasses in thin frames, not resembling the ones Harry wore at all, different in every possible way. "So, do you want me to be your lawyer?" she asked finally, when he read everything and seemed a little bit confused. "As you say, I'm going to keep anything I know in secret, except it's convenient for you. And I can assure you I'm pretty good at a dispute in court. They taught me well over the years." "It's not that," Malfoy said, looking straight into her eyes. "It's more if you want to be my lawyer." "What?" Hermione asked, a little bit lost. "When I tell you what I'm accused of, I don't know if you will want to take the case," he said, visibly uncomfortable. It was a very weird view. She didn't remember him being like this ever. "I'll have to if you sign it," she said calmly, "but okay, if you want to tell me first, please go on." Malfoy leaned back on his chair, clasping his hands together on his chest. He was wearing silky chemise in a very deep cherry color that would look stupid on any other man, and a black waistcoat with golden buttons. Hermione talked just how expensive they must have been. "I'll say everything, just promise you won't interrupt," he said in a deep, dark voice. Just as he wanted to scare her, it of course didn't work at all. "Sir," she nodded. "Okay then. As you may know or not, I had or have a wife," he started. Hermione didn't know, so she shook her head and he went on. "Her name is Astoria Greengrass. We knew each other for a very long time, just as our families did. But I never liked her. She was slimy, if you know what I mean. She only wanted to tie a knot because of my family's money, which was great. I can't say no. Not that I cared for her, because I didn't. You know, Granger, in pure blood families, it sometimes gets to be like this. You have to marry someone you don't like or even despise just for money and nice children. You can survive this, obviously. It brings more benefits than damage. I was ready for this, but obviously wasn't. Meaning, she cocked me once with a girl, I suppose," said Malfoy indifferently, "shortly after the wedding." "Horrible," scoffed Hermione, not being able to help herself. "Exactly. I knew Astoria didn't give a damn about me, but when she saw me with that girl, she lost her mind, let's say. And she paid the girl a lot to convince everyone, even my mother and father, that in fact." He stopped, staring at Hermione blankly with his almost white, hypnotizing eyes. "They all think I raped her," said Malfoy finally, which is not true, and I need you to prove it, because my divorce isn't final yet, and she sure as hell is going to use it in the court to win all my money." Hermione frowned, then grunted. "If I were to represent you, I need to know when your hearing will take place," she said. "In a month." "And who will represent the victim?" "Someone you may know, Pansy Zabini." "Wait, Pansy Parkinson?" asked Hermione. "She changed her name after marrying that asshole, but yes, her. She's a lawyer. I didn't hear anything about it, and I work here for almost 5 years. Maybe she's no good," said Draco, pushing papers in Hermione's direction. "So will you sign them? You want to represent someone like me?" "I'll represent anyone if they'll pay me." "You saw the fee? If you're willing to give me that much, whether you win or lose, I'll try my best anyway." Malfoy looked, for the first time ever, probably surprised. His face, even though still marble-like pale and handsome, got a shadow of uncertainty. "But do you believe me, Granger?" he asked with a strong emphasis. "Why should it matter?" asked Hermione, shining the papers, using her favorite golden black pen that Ron once gave her as a gift. "Maybe it doesn't," replied Draco, "but I would like to know." "You'll never know, probably. That's the policy," said Hermione, handing him the forms. "Here you are. We are settled. I need to gather every possible piece of evidence, so I'll need the girl's information. I'll give you everything you need, and you will have to walk me through your story with Astoria. Anything we may use in court," added Hermione, already sinking deeper and deeper into the case. "Sir Malfoy, will you tell me something?" asked Hermione when he almost left office. "Yes?" When you saw me, why didn't you turn back? There are at least three great magical lawyers I know, many more I don't know, who are pure blood. To name some of them, Hans Abbott, Francis Rosier, or May Gage. Why me? She wasn't sure she wanted an answer, but he gave one anyway. I always believed you were extraordinary in Hogwarts, he said without any sign of emotion in his voice. Everyone said so, and I believed it's true. I didn't like you and still don't, Granger, but you do have your way with knowledge, and I trust you. If you fall, if you will fail anyway, I'll destroy you. Then he left the room. Chapter 5. Hermione had a lot of notes and goats in her bag, but didn't want to startle him with all the lawyer talk as soon as she opened her mouth. So she decided to sit calmly and wait for the first coffee to be drank, and then take on the work talk. Coffee was quite nice. She took a big sip and saw him coming through the front door. "Morning," he said, taking a seat. "I must say, this is a pretty nice place." "I'm shocked you don't criticize," she said bitterly. "I can't remember you ever saying a nice word to me, either." "That's not a lie," Malfoy said with a slightly smile lighting up his whole face. "Sorry about that." "Seriously?" "I mean, we were like 15 when we last saw each other," he said, shrugging his shoulders. Today Ashley noticed he was wearing a bottle green shirt and a dark woolen sweater, obviously really expensive. Good thing she wore her best outfit too. Sorry, I was stupid. But again, we are adults now, so I should forget how you turned my life into a nightmare, she asked, looking at him from her under her lashes, which she specifically extended today using her very delicate magic. "Not that," he said, annoyed. "Just please be aware that people change, okay, Granger?" "Yes, of course," said Hermione with the most contempt she could have. "Never mind anyway, Mr. Malfoy. What matters is that you tell me everything you can and need to about Astoria Greengrass. Any delicate points, anything I can use, you go." Draco sighed and looked at his coffee in a white cup. It was really hot, but he drank a big sip anyway. "I'll try," he promised, and brushed his ashen hair with long fingers. "Okay then." Astoria was a very smart and intelligent young woman, 2 years younger than me and probably much more emotional. Our families knew each other for ages, which is quite normal in pure blood lines, as you know. He stopped, looked at Hermione, who made her self-writing pen note it all down, and sighed again. "Sorry, you might not have known about that. But it's true, all pure-blood families know each other, and my father decided that my marriage with Astoria would be good for both me and her. My family is not in a good position after the war, such as Astoria's, and with my parents' divorce it all became a little bit ugly." "Yes, I know. I guess I knew that," said Hermione. When there was a complete silence, Draco nodded. "I don't like Astoria very much," he added suddenly. "We really met only a while before the proposal, and she didn't seem like much my type, if you know what I mean." "I don't," said heartily Hermione, sipping her white coffee. "Well, so to say, she didn't like anything I liked." She was really money-oriented, mostly cared about her looks, clothes, and banquets. She loved to sing that one pretty nicely too, but it's all stuff I don't really love, said Malfoy impatiently. She preferred to spend whole day with her rich friends on Diagonal, trying to get the perfect dress, rather than go get some food with me, or really anything. So she basically didn't like you, summed up Hermione, probably. Why blame her? You're not a very likable kind. Come on, with her I really did try. I even knew what her favorite musician was and bought tickets to the concert. Did you go? Yes, she hated it. Hermione laughed and finished her coffee. Funny, so your wife hated your guts and that's why you finally cheated on her. She cheated too. I was well aware of it. Hermione was fed up. She looked at him with tiredness in her eyes. Listen to me carefully, Malfoy. I'm here to prove that you didn't rape some girl whose name I don't even know. For the time being, I don't want to know your life story. I only need to know what happened, who and when sued you for it, and how can we get out of it. That's why we are getting coffee today. Yes, yes, he said, rolling his eyes. I know, Granger, just trying to give you some context. But never mind. The day it all happened was when Astoria was supposed to be with her mother at some exhibition. I don't know what was it. Some centaur was supposed to present something, I think. I was at home, I mean Malfoy Manor, all alone. So I decided to invite a friend, and she was texting me all the weekend, really wanting to meet a friend. Exactly. Her name was Minnie. I can't remember the last name. I acquainted her at some banquet. She was 19, very eager to get to know some of us. By us, I mean royals. Do you know you are no royal anymore? Malfoy asked Hermione. I'm aware you don't perceive me as one, Granger, replied Draco. May I continue? Go on. Well, she was, as I said, really eager to get closer to any of us. Didn't really matter who it was. She was flirting with me as well as with Blishwick and Selwyn, and they're both exquisitely ugly. I don't know them, so I won't judge. Okay then. Min was into everyone who was, as far as she knew, pure blood. I know now that her parents really wanted her to marry into some great family. How do you know that? She told me herself. Don't get me wrong, Granger. I actually didn't like her, not really, but she was nice and quite pretty and supremely drunk. That night she came to my place. She was an easy target, but I didn't overuse any power I had over her. Believe it or not, she wanted to be mine that night, just as she wanted to become my wife and take Astoria's place. So why didn't she? Astoria went back and cooked us doing something. She cooked it on a moving photograph, you know what I mean, and later on she told my parents. I thought that was her revenge, but no, she also told all of the newspapers that I raped the poor girl, and she probably paid her to say whatever she wanted. How do you know she paid Minnie and not, for that matter, used a spell on her? Malfoy looked at Hermione as if she was stupid for just a second. But it felt peculiarly familiar. If Astoria would have used an Imperio, I'd have known. I'm not stupid, and I can distinguish when a girl has free will and when she does not, so please. It's obvious she must have paid Minnie. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. It's your job to prove it. he said harshly, staring at her closely. "I will, in a week or so. I'll contact you when I have my evidence. We'll be ready for a trial," she said, closing her journal. He looked at her with an inscrutable face. "So goodbye, Hermione Granger," he said. "How nice. You remember my name," she replied, snorting. "Great. It will look nicer in a court of law." "Don't be like that," he started, but before he was finished, she was already gone. It was him and the rest of a cold black coffee in a cup. Chapter 6. Hermione missed Ron. She missed him so deeply she couldn't sleep a whole night without dreamlike remains of his touch, his face. She saw his eyes smile, felt his kisses, and woke up in pain. Sadder than before. Nothing worked. Even the strongest spells and greatest potions. She was just heartbroken. The date of Malfoy's trial was coming faster than slower, and Hermione worked on it really hard. Despite her own problems, she spied out the poor Minnie, young, quite innocent girl who didn't really know what was going on in the bigger game around her, and she spotted on even greater events that could help Malfoy's case. It didn't bring her any joy, but she collected any piece of information she could have and was happy that she was ready for the cross-examination she knew was coming. The day of a trial was the day of a trial she was driving to the Wizengamot courthouse in a gap, dressed as elegant as she could have, reading all of the notes she had made in the past month. She was sure she knew everything, but she still was a bit anxious. It was probably about her client. She didn't trust Draco Malfoy at all. Even after her own investigation, it didn't really matter. She had to be the best anyway. The London London courtroom was bigger than she'd remember and scarier. Nevertheless, she felt awesome there. Old walls carrying the knowledge of generations that had passed. Floors that were walked by thousands of innocents and guilty. To her understanding this, and only this place, was the greatest of all. She loved its darkness and seriousness, and even the fact that it smelled of death was somehow familiar to her didn't make her scared. The trial started as always. They brought the possible perpetrator inside. This time he wasn't held captive, not in a cage, or even in chains, but still everyone knew he was the one and held their breath. When guards brought him into the courtroom, Draco was standing tall, dressed all in black. Hermione had to admit he looked good in that color, adequate, and had a very serious face. Something inside of her shifted when she saw that eyes, silver and alive, very much alive, eyes of a person wanting to be heard, a person who wouldn't lie, but he was a liar. It didn't matter to her now, but he was one always, had it in his blood. After Draco was brought into the courtroom, there was a time provided for a victim to speak. She had her own representative, and it was, as Hermione knew before, Pansy Parkinson or Pansy Sabini. The woman that sat chair by chair with the victim looked very much like a person Hermione remembered from her school years. Pansy was tall, pale, had dark long hair, and a weird kind of superiority somehow written into her face. She was also very pretty, just as an old statue made of marble would be pretty. Minnie, on the other hand, wasn't pretty at all. Hermione was, even to her own surprise, shocked that Draco would have ever wanted to romance that girl. But she immediately blamed herself for it. Minnie was small, petite, even seemed scared, and her face was shrunken. She had short, brown hair and was dressed poorly, yet Hermione knew that it was Pansy who suggested that only to make their version of events seem more real. The version that Hermione knew was not true. Pansy asked some questions about the critical night and Minnie answered in a trembling, unsure voice. She said that Draco invited her to his manor and then gave her strong alcohol and seduced her by using magic. She said he promised he'd leave his wife for her, and later, when she said she doesn't want to sleep with him, he forced her to do so, tying her hands up using a spell, silencing her, and then judges, and then there were three of them, chosen carefully by the Wizengamot, started to ask questions. What exactly happened, and where? Are you sure it was Draco Malfoy who did it? How much did you drink beforehand? Did you decide yourself what will you do? They asked, and Minnie answered, not looking up. She said everything the way Hermione predicted. Draco was guilty. He used her to get revenge on Astoria, who wasn't the way he wanted to, who wasn't obedient like a dog. She was drunk, didn't remember much, and she remembers saying no, and he still went on as if she said yes. Then Astoria went inside and cocked them. Hermione knew magical criminal code all too well when it came to rape cases, or cases concerning other delicate matters, such as this. Foraging in a victim's memories in their head was forbidden, since any extraction could bring irreversible changes to the victim's mind. With the perpetrator's mind, the court didn't even bother searching for anything in it, as far as any reasonable person would have deleted any aggravating memories out of their heads. Hermione was smarter than that. I want to say something, she said when it came to her turn, standing up. I want to show you something, to be exact. She said she had evidence with herself, prepared as ever. At first she wasn't sure Malfoy wasn't guilty, but anything she started digging, it was her job and she didn't care if the client did something wrong or not. This time she was almost sure she'd win when she handed out a vial full of memories to the members of Wizengamot Court. They took the vial and put its content, white, foggy and blurry, into the special goblet of their own table. Hermione clenched her hands nervously and looked at Malfoy sitting not far from her, on the place specifically intended for the accused. He cocked her look, his eyes as lively as ever, not silver but blue, sparkling, even full of hope. She couldn't handle this look for long, turned her eyes on the judges. The chairman took the vial, uncorked it, and admitted it to the evidence, not feeling any manifestation of black magic in it. Then he tilted the vial and let the silvery dense substance of human memories land into the goblet, going by the name of the truth. The memory sank in nothingness inside the goblet, got sucked inside. Later later everyone in the courtroom saw what Hermione wanted them to say. Minnie was sitting in the corner of a Muggle restaurant, or something more like a bar. She didn't order anything. She looked like an animal cooked by a hunter. She looked just as mediocre as today at the courtroom. Meanwhile, on the opposite of her sat the most astounding person. Hermione didn't shiver only because she saw the memory earlier, while collecting it from the owner of a bar, who by a chance happened to be a half-mage. Hermione knew that, according to the magical criminal code, she couldn't take a memory from a muggle even if they let her do so. If she did do this, she couldn't have used it in a court of law. So she was pretty happy when she tracked, not tricked, tracked down the owner of a bar, and later on found out that his mother was a Hogwarts student once upon a time. Anyway, Astoria Greengrass made a truly amazing impression. She had naturally black, long hair which she curled into perfect tamed waves, beautiful, smooth face with brownish big eyes and amazingly regular eyebrows and full, perfect lips. She also dressed interestingly, but in a good manner. In a memory which was now a part of evidence, Minnie sat in front of Astoria and looked at her, not knowing what was going on. Then Astoria talked, her voice as ideal as her body and face, deep and melodic. "I know you were at the banquet at Malfoy Manor last week," she said, blinking confidentially to Minnie. "There were lots of people and liquor. You had fun, didn't you?" "Well, I did," said Minnie. "So, I also know you like Draco Malfoy." "Yes, I guess I do," said Minnie carefully. "Good for you, girl. I have an opportunity, let's call it that, for you. Tomorrow I need you to send some messages to him, saying you are free and wanting to meet him. You will be there, and you will make Sir Draco drinks pretty much of wine or whiskey, the one that he likes. Are we clear?" The memory is shady, but Minnie looked surprised. "But why would I?" "Because you want to sleep with him, that's why," said Astoria in a haughty way. "Who told you this? I just like him. He's handsome and nice, but quiet, girl, quiet, or I'll make you go quiet." Minnie stopped talking. "Then you will dance with him," instructed Astoria, "as close as you can get. Touch his hands, cheeks. Be flirty." "I don't want to do this," snarled Minnie. "I don't even know him." "Okay, you will. Or I will ruin your life. That old man in the nursing home you visit every week, that small boy your brother's wife had recently." Astoria snapped her fingers. "They can all be gone in a second, girl. Don't make me do it." "But why do you want me to seduce him?" asked Minnie nervously. She probably thought she was invited for a cup of coffee by a friend, and didn't know it would turn into a nightmare full of threatening. "What do you really want?" "I'm going to prove to everyone," said Astoria, squinting her eyes like a predator lurking for prey, "that he is a monster and doesn't deserve me. He cheated on me at least twice, and now I need to prove not only he's a cheater, but also that he's a beast in a human skin." "So is he your husband?" Minnie's face filled with fear and something close to disgust. "Not for long. You shouldn't be doing this, but I am. And so will you, or else you know what will happen. I know half your family is not magical, and I can make that muggles disappear in a blink of an eye. What do you say?" Minnie looked at her hands, trembling visibly. She was pale as a sheet of paper, obviously torn. "I will do it," said Minnie eventually. "Great, then you shall initiate an intercourse," Astoria instructed. "Do you know what I mean?" "Am I really to sleep with your husband?" asked Minnie, shocked. Exactly what I have in mind. Shouldn't be too hard. Do you want it, girl? Don't get me wrong, Draco is very handsome, but I don't want to ruin your marriage. Oh, come on. I really don't want it to happen, said Minnie sadly. You know what happens if you refuse or bail, honey? And there's something more. What else do you want from me? The girl's eyes filled with tears. Asteria leaned forwards towards Minnie over the table. Their voices are fuzzy now. People in a courtroom can't hear every one and each of their words. You are going to tell everyone the day after it happens that Draco forced you to do it. What? No way. You will do what exactly I just said. Mind your father, sweetheart, and your small niece. Hermione was proud of herself, even though the memory she saw them was all horrible. It took her a lot of fatigue and a great amount of money to prompt the bar's owner, who didn't know almost anything about magic, to let her get this memory. As a person who wasn't trained in that, he also didn't extract it from other memories in his head, and Hermione spent a significant amount of time trying to find a meaningful one and separating it from the rest. She was anyway happy now. It worked out just as she was planned it. When the memory ended, courtroom sat in a complete silence. Later on, the chairman raised his hand and said, "Now there shall be time for the conference and vote." Hermione looked at Malfoy again. His face seemed already victorious. He was satisfied, gave her a glance of acclamation. Hermione didn't need that. She was aware of her strength in court. Judges came back to their places beneath a long table in the middle of a courtroom. They looked serious, scary even. Everyone got up from their places like it was written in the courtroom's etiquette. "Now it's time for our judgment," said the chairman, unrolling the scroll that he held. "In the case number 2403 this year, concerning Mr. Draco Malfoy, represented by Hermione Granger, our verdict, upon the evidence that was carried out was unanimous. Draco Malfoy shall be found as innocent of the alleged offense." Hermione knew it. The verdict couldn't have been different after what she obtained. She smirked, looked at her client, and seeing his face getting brighter lighter, it was his, not hers, moment of glory, but she felt great. "And let Astoria Greengrass be held accountable in front of another court some another time. Hermione will make sure it will happen someday after the divorce when Astoria gets nothing." The last, but not least, Chapter 7. "Congrats, lawyer," said Draco, putting a bottle of champagne on Hermione's desk. It was another cheap champagne. "Nothing to congratulate me on," replied Hermione, pushing away papers laying on her desk. "You were innocent, so you won. Good for you. Not many lawyers would have gone to rummage in a random half-muggle's memory, not to mention finding the right muggle," said Malfoy, sitting in the chair in front of Hermione's desk. Her office was dark. She didn't know what time it was, but surely after midnight. She just stayed in the office, not wanting to come home to an empty bedroom and her grieving buried in every piece of furniture and every wall there was. "I'm just extraordinary," she said, looking at him. He still wore the same clothes as during the trial, but he had something in his eyes that made his face look different. "You sure are. But please don't start hitting on me." "Or what?" She wouldn't have admitted But this question squeezed the air out of her lungs. "Or I'll terminate the contract," she said coldly, "and the next time you'll get in trouble you won't have me by your side." "I wouldn't have wanted it." He smiled and opened the champagne bottle. The beverage hissed, but didn't explode, which Hermione believed was an effect of very sublime magic. "Drink with me," he said, handing her the bottle. Hermione laughed uncontrollably. "Never," she said. "Can't you remember what you did to me, Malfoy? What happened to me because of you? If I were a little bit weaker, I would have never been in the place I am now because of you." "Not because of me, but my father," he corrected Hermione calmly. "I might have been horrible, but I was nothing but a child born into a terrible family. He wasn't wrong." Hermione looked at him and smiled, then took a big sip uh, of champagne, looking him straight in the eyes. "At least you didn't harm this poor girl," she said. "No, Malfoy, you're fine by me. We're all different now. The war has changed literally everything." "Granger, I'm sorry about your husband. I've heard." "What have you heard?" "That he got sick and passed. I wanted to, I don't know, send a card, anything, but I was sure you'd send me to hell." "That's where you belong, sir," she replied, "but thank you. Are you fine?" "As fine as a widow can be, thanks." "Granger, you won me my freedom." Malfoy said suddenly. Half of the bottle of champagne was now empty. She couldn't have said who and when drank it. "I did, yes," she said, looking into his silvery eyes, "that at some point in her life made her scared. And you once hit me." He laughed. Hermione couldn't help but laugh too. She took another sip from the bottle of champagne. "It was flawless. I still remember it fondly," she said, recalling her hand landing on his cheek with a terrible slapping sound. She couldn't help but laugh again. "I loved it, to be honest. I deserved it," said Malfoy. "Well, today was a big day and I'm a bit tired. It's past 12. I'm going home now." "Have a safe journey," said Hermione, still smirking to her memories. Draco Malfoy stood up, circled her desk, and fondly squeezed Hermione's hand. His fingers were cold, but not as she imagined them to be, resembling death. No, they were very much alive, long, strong, living, burning trails on her skin. His ashen hair smelled as the fog rising from the moors in the morning, and his eyes had an impenetrable expression, hard and dark as a stone. "Thank you, Granger," he whispered, and suddenly everything had shifted, even though nothing has really changed. Hermione noticed that his face was way closer to hers than it should have been. "Nothing to be thankful for, Malfoy," she whispered, when he leaned down and kissed her slowly, giving her a lot of time to lean back, to break the kiss, and end this. She didn't. How could she, when he smelled like home, like everything she wanted, like life? How could she, when he looked at her that way, with hidden compassion, and she knew he felt exactly the same things she felt? He had lost a lot, she should tell, and he suddenly opened up to her in one kiss. His lips were soft, not as she would have guessed, cold and hard. He stopped all of a sudden, looked into her eyes, still forehead to forehead, nose to nose, and Hermione found a lot of things in that silver look. Things she never thought she would have found in the eyes of someone she once thought a traitor, a murderer, a Death Eater. Now she had seen he was much more, if not just something different. He kissed her once more, slowly leaning towards her, as if she was the only thing he ever wanted, leaving sweet and yet bitter taste of suddenly outworn, irrelevant glory of her mouth, which was surprisingly ready to invite him. When Malfoy left the office, without a word, without a glance, Hermione sat there for an hour, not able to move any part of her body, helpless again, terrified again, broken again. And this is the end of the story. Thank you very much.